My sister had always been the favorite. That wasn't an opinion, it was a fact everyone in our family lived by. From the time we were children, the difference between us was obvious. She was celebrated for breathing. I was tolerated for behaving. When she spoke, people listened. When I spoke, they nodded politely and moved on. At family dinners, her plans were discussed like investments. Mine were treated like hobbies. She didn't ask for the spotlight. She inherited it. My parents dressed it up as encouragement, but the pattern never changed. If she failed, it was bad luck. If I failed, it was proof. Proof that I wasn't trying hard enough. Proof that I didn't have what it took. Proof that they were right to place their faith elsewhere. By the time we were adults, favoritism had hardened into expectation. She lived loudly, trips, luxury, praise, applause. I lived quietly, work, discipline, silence. And that silence fooled them. They thought I was behind. They thought I was dependent. They thought I was waiting for help that would never come. What they didn't realize was that I had learned something far more valuable than attention. I had learned how to operate without it. The deal that changed everything didn't begin with conflict. It began with celebration. My sister announced it over dinner like a victory lap. A major partnership. Big numbers. Big future. My parents beamed like they had personally negotiated it. Glasses were raised. Compliments poured out. I listened. I always did. She spoke about expansion, about ownership, about how this deal proved she was finally on another level. She spoke confidently, because she believed everyone at that table existed to support her momentum. Then she said something that made me look up. "We don't need to worry about internal approval," she laughed. "Everything important is already handled." That was new. I glanced at my parents. They looked pleased, proud, comfortable. No one looked at me. And that's when I realized something was wrong. The deal she was celebrating touched territory I knew very well. Not because I was involved publicly, but because I was involved structurally. Quietly, legally, intentionally. I didn't interrupt her. I didn't correct her. I didn't expose anything. I waited. Because I knew one thing with certainty. If she was confident, it meant she hadn't read closely enough. Over the next few days, the praise intensified. Calls, messages, extended family congratulating her, people asking how she pulled it off. My parents basking in reflected glory. And still, no one asked me a single question. That was their mistake. The documents arrived the following week. Copies, signatures, final terms, everything neat and official, everything locked, according to them. I read every line, twice. Then I found it. A clause she had signed without understanding. A condition she had assumed didn't matter. A requirement she had overlooked because she believed favoritism would protect her from consequences. It was the kind of clause people ignore when they think power belongs to them by default. And the moment I understood what it meant, I knew the truth was already moving. She didn't know yet. My parents didn't know. But the deal that made her the favorite was about to expose everything they had ignored about me. The clause didn't scream danger. That's why she missed it. It sat quietly between sections about governance and dispute resolution, written in careful language meant to protect long-term interests, not egos. It required disclosure and consent from any silent stakeholder connected to adjacent assets and overlapping operational risk. In simpler terms, it meant this: the deal wasn't complete without me. Not because I was important to her, but because I was already there. I hadn't announced my position when I took it. I hadn't shared it at dinners or wrapped it in ambition. I had stepped into it years earlier, quietly, deliberately, through a separate channel that didn't require applause to function. She never imagined I would matter. The first sign of trouble didn't come from her. It came from the other side. A formal email, polite, neutral, addressed to all parties listed in the agreement. Subject: pending confirmation of secondary stakeholder alignment. My sister forwarded it to me with a single line. "Do you know what this is about?" I didn't reply. Within hours, the family group chat lit up. My parents were confused, irritated, dismissive. My sister brushed it off as routine paperwork and told everyone not to worry. But she was worrying. I could hear it in her voice when she called me that night, too calm, too careful. "You didn't tell me you were involved," she said. "I wasn't," I replied truthfully. "Not the way you think. That clause," she continued, "it mentions overlapping interests. Do you have something to do with that?" I paused, not for drama, but because I was choosing precision. "I own the adjacent entity," I said. Half for a while. Silence. Not the kind that follows shock. The kind that follows recalculation. "You're joking," she finally said. "No." Her breath caught. "Why wouldn't you say something?" I answered honestly. "You never asked." The call ended shortly after that. No accusations. No confrontation. Just the sound of control slipping. The next day, the pressure started. My parents came over unannounced. Not angry, concerned. That softer version of authority they used when they wanted compliance without conflict. They asked questions carefully. What did I own? How long? Why hadn't I included them? Why hadn't I helped my sister earlier? I answered without defensiveness. I didn't hide anything, I said. I just didn't offer it up for approval. That line unsettled them more than the facts. My sister, meanwhile, scrambled. She contacted advisors, pushed timelines, tried to reassure partners. She told them alignment was coming, that everything would be resolved internally. But alignment required consent, and consent required acknowledgement. For the first time in our lives, she needed something from me. She asked to meet, not as the favorite, not as the authority, but as an equal. We sat across from each other in a quiet room that didn't belong to either of us. No audience, no praise, just the truth between us. You could fix this, she said. If you wanted. I nodded. I know. Then why won't you? She asked. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't list grievances. I didn't recount years of being overlooked. I said one sentence. Because fixing this would mean pretending nothing else mattered. Her eyes searched my face for hesitation. There was none. The deadline passed 2 days later. And with it, the illusion that favoritism could substitute for structure. The deadline passed quietly. No dramatic emails. No angry calls. Just a short, formal notice confirming that the agreement would not proceed under its current structure. The language was neutral, professional, final. My sister read it 3 times before it sank in. She came to see me that evening, not announced, not triumphant, not rehearsed. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her, like the room had finally stopped bending around her presence. They walked away, she said. I nodded. That was always the risk. You didn't have to let it happen, she replied. Her voice wasn't angry anymore. It was stripped down to something raw. You could have signed. You could have aligned. I looked at her carefully, taking in the exhaustion, the disbelief, the way confidence had drained out of her posture. I could have, I said. But then nothing would have changed. She sank into the chair opposite me, hands clasped tightly. You never said you wanted anything. That's not true, I replied calmly. I stopped saying it when no one listened. She looked up then, really looked at me, for the first time in years. Our parents tried next, not with pressure this time, but with regret. They talked about misunderstandings, about how no one realized how much I'd accomplished on my own. About how proud they were. Now. I listened. I didn't argue. I didn't accept the apology either. Pride after the fact isn't recognition, I said. It's reaction. That ended the conversation. The fallout wasn't explosive. It was corrective. My sister's deal collapsed, not because she wasn't capable, but because she had built it on assumptions instead of understanding. Investors moved on. Opportunities cooled. The praise that once followed her everywhere found new places to land. And for the first time, she had to sit with herself, without an audience. As for me, life didn't suddenly become perfect. But it became honest. I didn't need to announce wins to be seen. People who mattered began to notice on their own. Doors opened quietly. Conversations changed. Not because I demanded respect, but because I no longer negotiated my worth. Months later, my sister and I crossed paths again at a family gathering. Smaller. Simpler. No speeches. No spotlights. She didn't avoid me. She didn't challenge me either. She just nodded, once. It wasn't reconciliation. It wasn't victory. It was acknowledgement. And that was enough. They had given my sister luxury, trips, and praise for years, believing that was what power looked like. I bought something else. I bought leverage without noise. Security without permission. And a life where the truth didn't need applause to stand. The deal didn't just expose her. It exposed the story our family had been telling itself for decades. And once the illusion broke, there was no rebuilding it.